the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the Little League, and so on. And the fourth was the radio station. The military radio station had been an imperfect cultural lifeline for Americans in Taiwan. A lifeline because it provided American news and American music and a source that was vitally important back in those days, before the internet, before satellite radio, even before there was an International Herald Tribune or a Wall Street Journal circulated in Taiwan. And yet imperfect because there was no local news on the military radio station. It could have been in the middle of Kansas. There was nothing about what was going on in Taiwan. There was nothing when typhoons came up. There were no weather bulletins. And so I saw an opportunity not only to continue what was good about that station, but to have a better one. To have one that reflected what was going on in Taiwan and really related the international business community to the people of Taiwan. It took a lot of cooperation between the American business community, the Taiwan government, the American military, and others to pull that together in the 90 days that we had before the U.S. military would turn off the lights and yank out the equipment. The goal was not 1 minute of silence between the sign off the air of the military radio station and the sign on of ICRT. The goal really being the symbol of continuity in the relationship between the U.S. and Taiwan. Fortunately, we were able to succeed in doing that. At the same time, we had a greater, more fundamental issue of how a legalistic country like the United States could continue to have a complex relationship with a country that it no longer officially recognized diplomatically. Carter and his State Department had created chaos, and it was up to the Congress and to those of us who testified before the Congress to find a way to restore coherence to American policy and provide a basis for going forward. Congress wanted to hear from the U.S. business community that was involved with Taiwan, and I was invited to Washington, D.C. to testify. I told Congress that we didn't oppose improving relations with China. After all, American business was beginning to have quite a bit of contact with China. But it should not be at the expense of our friends in Taiwan. We said that business depends on certainty and security, and we wanted to see, since the Carter administration had given notice of terminating the Mutual Defense Treaty, we wanted to see Congress enact a strong commitment to the security of Taiwan. We wanted a new legal basis that created a structure for going forward. Congress listened, and they wrote those recommendations into what became the Taiwan Relations Act. Someone writing about the Taiwan Relations Act a few months later referred to it as legislative re-recognition. And I think in terms of substance, that's what we achieved. I remember during the darkest days of the crisis, before I went to Washington, there were demonstrations in Taipei, as you would expect. And I recall a banner that someone strung along the fence that divides the boulevard there on Zhongshan Beilu in Taipei. It was written in English. It was very well put. It said, Carter, you may recall that Jimmy Carter, before he was president, had been a Georgia peanut farmer. The banner said, "Carter sells peanuts, also friends." That was absolutely right. And it struck us as exactly the wrong place for America to be. And so when we were able, through the testimony and the good response that we had from Congress, the passage of the Taiwan Relations Act, to correct that mistake, it was very gratifying. The Taiwan Relations Act, or the TRA, is landmark foreign policy legislation. It's one of a kind. And it has stood the test of time now for 35 years. It's provided the basis for a vibrant, vital relationship between the US and Taiwan, and it has helped to keep the peace. Taiwan, therefore, is very important to the United States in ways that are not always obvious or readily understood. Our relationship is a proof of shared values and the dependability of American security commitments. It also demonstrates the role of free enterprise and the rule of law in producing an economic miracle, and the achievement of real democracy at no cost in American lives and very low cost of American dollars. Think of the contrast right now with the thousands of American lives lost in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the $trillions spent with questionable results trying to achieve what Taiwan has achieved peacefully. In other areas that I referred to, like the successful use of foreign aid and the graduation from that program, when Taiwan said in 1965 to the U.S., "Thank you very much, you've helped us enormously. We don't need it anymore, we can take it from here." The very wise recognition that nuclear proliferation was not in Taiwan's long-term best interest. Rising to the challenge of protecting intellectual property rights and spreading the wealth for both countries. By becoming a wealthy society, Taiwan spread the wealth for its own citizens, but also helped create wealth for Americans who were involved through investment and trade with Taiwan and many other people around the world. Thus, Taiwan is important not only to the United States, but to the world as a model of economic development with fair distribution of benefits to its people, and as an example of the peaceful evolution to democracy. Not often understood is that Taiwan is also important to the PRC, not in the terms that the PRC is fond of talking about, claiming that it's a province of theirs. But first of all, and perhaps most obviously, as a source of investment, of technological innovation, of management know-how, and economic development that, again, has created wealth for people in China, as well as for people in Taiwan. But also, and perhaps somewhat less obviously, because the use of force to achieve the PRC's aims would be a very costly failure of policy, alarming to China's neighbors, and would come at high cost to China's reputation and relationships. For those of you who have friends who may not understand how the issues between Taiwan and China have arisen and might over the longer term be resolved, and where there is room to improve the situation that the world faces now, I can recommend to you a book published recently by Richard Bush of the Brookings Institution. Richard Bush, as many of you know, is a former chairman of AIT, and one of the really creative thinkers in this issue of this area of American foreign policy. Richard has written several books, but the one that I recommend to you is called Uncharted Strait. And finally, I want to say that Taiwan's importance is not only to the United States and to the world and even the PRC, but of course to Taiwan's own people in terms of fulfilling their aspirations and their achievements. So there is much to celebrate about Taiwan and about our relationship, but there's very little room for complacency. There are important challenges ahead. Taiwan must maintain its strength and its global economic competitiveness. It must what is now probably the best known building in Taiwan, Taipei 101. And she says Taipei 101 is a great symbol because it represents a high-tech emblem of commercial success. It's impressive and it stands alone, as indeed it does, dominating the skyline of Taipei. So when we survey the horizon in Taiwan, we find that there are challenges ahead to be sure, but also great reasons to have confidence if the necessary steps to maintain confidence are taken.
Also says about when we are